Hi, my name is Richard Amster. I'm one of the chef instructors at Suffolk County Community College's Culinary Arts and Hospitality Center, and the video you're about to see is a lesson I did in front of one of my baking classes on pastry cream. I'm submitting this as part of my certification process. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks very much. Okay, today we're going to start to talk about custards, and one particular custard in particular, pastry cream. So just a little bit of an introduction for custards. Generally speaking, you can think of a custard as some type of dairy liquid or a combination of dairy liquids, milk, half and half, heavy cream, thickened by either eggs and some type of starch. Okay? You're probably familiar with things like creme brulee and creme caramel. These are custards that are cooked in the oven. They are thickened with eggs. So you have a dairy liquid, either milk, heavy cream, or half and half, or a combination. You've got eggs that do the thickening, and you've got some type of seasoning, usually sugar, when you're talking about sweet custards. Savory things, not a problem at all. You can think of the custard that goes in to make a quiche as also a custard thickened with egg protein. It fits the general definition of dairy liquids seasoned and thickened with eggs, or eggs and starch. The custard that we're going to be talking about today is called pastry cream. It's a stirred custard, and it is thickened with egg yolks and cornstarch. And we're going to cook this on the stove. So what I'd like to go over today is the recipe and do the method, do the demonstration for the method. Any questions that you have while we're doing this, please feel free to ask. From a safety point of view, there's no real risk to making this. The only thing you really need to be aware of is, of course, you're working on a stove. You've got fire and hot pans and hot liquid. But from a safety point of view, there's no other real issue involved, so you don't have to worry about that too much. Okay, you have your recipe packet, so let's go over that. You've got the first two ingredients, 3 ounces of sugar and a pint of milk. And what you need to do is take 3 ounces of sugar and a pint of milk and put it into a stainless steel pan. Important that it be stainless steel. Okay, stainless steel is a non-reactive metal. Aluminum is a reactive metal and can turn the milk inside a little bit on the grayish side. Okay, so make sure it's stainless steel. On a burner, you want to heat that until you start to see steam coming off of the milk. Okay, you've got a whisk over here. Make sure that that sugar gets dissolved in the milk. And while you're doing that, we want to make up the next couple of components. On your recipe packet, you've got 3 ounces additional sugar and 1 1/4 ounces of cornstarch. Okay, cornstarch is going to be one of the thickening agents, and it's important that all of the cornstarch get into the mixture. So what I would like you to do is, when you scale your second 3 ounces of sugar and your 1 1/4 ounces of cornstarch, is do it this way. Put the sugar down first and put the cornstarch on top. Now normally when we scale different ingredients that are going to be mixed together at the same time, I ask you to put little piles around the outside so that you can double check, and if you over pour, you can take it out without destroying the accuracy of the other weights. This time, however, I want you to use a plastic spoon and put the cornstarch right on top, okay, for a very important reason. Sifter, please. We're going to sift these two dry ingredients into a bowl. Okay, whenever you're using cornstarch in the kitchen, you want to make sure it's sifted. Thank you. And the reason that I want you to put that cornstarch on top of the sugar is this. The sugar is going to act like little ball bearings, and it's all going to slide right out. Okay? If the cornstarch is down first, you are going to have to go back and sweep the scoop to try to get all the cornstarch in. And it's just a waste of time. Remember, your practical for this item is a timed practical, so any time you can save is going to be in your benefit. And also, it's the best practice to do. So, sift it. And again, the reasons we want to sift. Anybody?
No lumps.
No lumps. Take out impurities. Anybody else?
I was going to say take out impurities.
Okay, take out impurities, aerate, separate, and make a uniform blend. Okay? So, a few little impurities in there. Get those out. Back to check our milk. I see steam coming off the pan, and this is good. Okay? All we really want to do is get that milk steaming and take it off the heat. Now, cornstarch and sugar. What we want to do now is add the eggs, which is the other thickening agent for the pastry cream. As always, when we separate, we need, in this case, 3 yolks and 1 whole egg. So, let's take care of the 1 whole egg. And now for the 3 yolks, we want to keep the whites, so we're going to separate the eggs using the reservoir method. Let's let the whites run through. And again, shell to shell is better than through your hands. Take that yolk, put it right down there. The white is clean. Let's save it. Clean. There we go. Now we can use these whites for another purpose. Okay, now 3 yolks, 1 egg, 1 1/4 ounces of cornstarch, 3 ounces of sugar. What we want to do is make a paste out of this material in the bowl. Okay, we're going to use our whisk to do that. One little tip you might want to keep in mind, and that is don't add the eggs to the sugar and make this paste in advance. Do this right before we start to add some of that hot milk to this. And the reason is very simple. If you've ever added smooth paste, make sure we get all of the cornstarch and sugar incorporated. Okay? If you've ever added combined egg yolks or eggs and sugar together and let them sit, they form little beads, little kind of beads. That's basically the egg absorbing some of the sugar, and those things are really hard to get out. So if you do this right before you start to add the liquid, you won't have a problem with it. Okay? So now what we've got is 3 yolks, an egg, cornstarch and sugar, hot milk and sugar over here. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to take half of that milk, hot milk and sugar, and we're going to temper, that's a technical word, temper half of that milk into this egg mixture. We're going to take the remaining milk, put it back on the stove, bring the remaining milk to a boil. When that comes to a boil, we add all of this to that, whisk very hard, very briskly until the whole thing comes together and thickens. Okay? So let's try this. First things first. Let's take a wet sanitation rag. Yeah, question.
Why do you temper the eggs?
Great question. We are going to add a very hot liquid to an egg mixture. Very sensitive. We don't want to take the risk of cooking those eggs. Okay? So we're going to add a little bit at a time, whisking the whole time, a little bit at a time, to sort of raise the temperature of that and thin that out, and then add all of this back to the remaining milk. So first things first, let's take a wet sanitation rag and make a rat tail out of it. Make a collar. And set your bowl inside that collar. So now, as I'm pouring and whisking, the bowl is stable. This is a one-person job. Okay? So let's try this. Hot milk and sugar. Now you could do this with cold milk. The colder the milk, the longer it's going to take for you to cook this on the stove. The hotter the milk, the shorter the stirring time on the stove. Okay, so we can do this. We'll probably end up stirring on the stove for about a minute or so, maybe a minute and a half tops, which is what you want. You don't want to be standing on a stove stirring pastry cream from cold milk. So, hot milk and sugar, whisk sensitive egg mixture, whisking the whole time, just a little bit at a time. Incorporate that. Nice and smooth. This process is called tempering, okay? A way to get something very hot into something very sensitive without cooking the eggs, okay? So, now, this is going to go back on the stove, and we're going to bring this to a boil. When this comes to a boil, we're going to add all of this to that, whisking the entire time. There's a couple things you need to be aware of. There's very little milk in this pan. The depth of that is probably no more than 1/4 of an inch. Okay? So that means when we pour this in, by the time the first pour hits the pan's going to be very hot, boiling milk, remember, you stand a chance of cooking the eggs right away, which is why you want to be whisking this before you add all of this in at one time. We good? Once it's in, you're going to be whisking around and through the center, around and through the center, around and through the center, until this mixture comes to a second boil, or a bloop moment. If you've ever made a marinara or some kind of a thickened sauce, you know that when it first pops, that's considered the second boil. As soon as that happens, this is done cooking on the stove and you can take it off. At that point, we'll add the last 2 remaining ingredients, the butter and the vanilla. Stir it. The heat of the pastry cream will melt the butter, and if you're adding chocolate, it would melt the chocolate. If you're adding other flavor ingredients, you put those in, extracts, and combine the whole thing to have your finished pastry cream. Okay, so let's do this. This goes back on the stove. We can turn up the heat on this one. Be very careful when you're doing this. You want to make sure that the flame itself is basically hitting the bottom of the pan and not coming up the sides of the pan. Okay? 2 reasons. One, you don't want to scorch what's in the pan, but also, since you're going to be working over the fire, if there's fire coming up the side of the pan, your wrist is going to get burned. So be careful of that. Bring the pan to the edge and make sure that the fire is just hitting the bottom of the pan. Any questions so far? Yeah.
Chef, the preferred method then with this type of, I guess, a delicate cream is always by hand, not using a machine to whisk everything?
I suppose you could use a machine. I feel like it's always better for you to master the hand technique first. Okay, I'm sure that in larger quantities you could do this, but I think in most operations you'll probably be making pastry cream. If you made it with a pint, 2 pints, 3 pints, it's very fast to make it by hand. All right, so this is almost there. It's starting to simmer. I can see bubbles around the edge, and we'll be at the boiling point in just a moment. Any other questions so far?
Yeah.
All right, so the question was, what do we do with pastry cream? First of all, you can make a number of flavors. Whatever flavor extract you want to add to it, coffee, almond flavored, lemon flavored, those extracts in addition to a little bit of vanilla, perfect. Chocolate you can add, caramel, you can add a little bit of caramel sauce to it. All right, so we're ready to go. This is boiling on the stove. So I'm going to bring this over here, whisk this, just to make sure that anything that has settled to the bottom is now in suspension. I'm coming over here, I'm whisking all at once. This goes in. Set this aside, and now around the outside and through the center, you're going to generate a lot of foam. The whisking is going to generate a lot of foam. And what's going to happen as you continue to do this is you'll start to feel it get a little bit thicker and a little bit thicker as the cornstarch activates. Okay? Cornstarch is activated by hot liquid. You're going to start to feel it get a little bit thick. You're also going to start to see some of the foam subside. All right, so I can feel it getting a little bit thicker. Foam is starting to go away. Do not slow down. And right before the whole thing pops, all that foam should be sucked into it. Pops. This is the finished, almost finished pastry cream. Okay? So to this, we're going to add our butter and vanilla. And use a spatula to stir that in. The hot pastry cream will melt the butter, incorporate the vanilla. And now the last thing we want to do is cool this. And the preferred way of doing this is to take a sheet tray lined with some plastic wrap, spread this out on top of the plastic wrap, smooth and thin, and then cover it with more plastic wrap. So literally the plastic wrap is on top of the pastry cream. Not just over it, but right on top of it. That's going to prevent the formation of a skin. And there we have it. Right on top, and we're ready to go. That goes in the refrigerator, let it cool. Again, coldest spots in the refrigerator, on top of the speed rack, bring it out in front of the fan, top shelves left and right, coldest spot. Probably 15 minutes, this will be nice and cool and ready to go. Pastry cream. Questions? Anybody?
Chef, is
Yep.
the sheet pan just to expedite the cooling?
Yes.
Or could you do it in a bowl?
You could, but the main thing is that you get the plastic wrap on top of the surface of the pastry cream so no skin forms. Anybody ever have their mom or grandmother make chocolate pudding or vanilla pudding from scratch at home, and it always has that thick skin on top of it?
Yeah.
We want to avoid that. Some people like it, but we want to avoid that for production purposes. Yes.
Is this close to the same thing as the pate choux where you want it to get to about 140, or does it not?
No, this is a little bit different. We want to get the pate choux down below 140 so we have the eggs, we don't cook the eggs. But this is done, this is going to cool, and then we're going to use it to fill today the pate choux, cream puffs, eclairs, and other products.
Is this a similar cream to like a Bavarian donut? Like what you
I don't know what the makeup of those donuts are. I'm sure that it's part pastry cream or was originally pastry cream, maybe with some whipped cream folded in. But you'll see, this is really good.
The good stuff?
Yeah.
All right.
All right.